Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Should you try to communicate with something you think is a ghost and you experience parallel lives during meditation? What are crisis apparitions?
Hello, and welcome to the 875th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I am Ben, and my dad over here, Paul. We are coming to you live from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app with and from TalkStream Live and TuneIn.com. Those far-flung questions came from my co-host, partner in the Paranormal, and dad, Paul. And today we bring you another open line show with our guest co-host, as always. And if you'd like to join us on the air, you can give us a call, 401-766-1240. That's from anywhere. Or email paul@behindtheparanormal.com, or you can reach out to us via various social media platforms, including Facebook and Instagram.
This is our final open line show of 2020, and I'm sure we all agree that the final anything of 2020 is good. And it's certainly great to have our favorite guest co-host back with us today. Welcome back, Shane Sirois.
Hey, guys. Hope everyone's well out there.
Well, Shane,
I guess we're doing as good as we can.
Yeah. Before we begin, we wanted to get as much support for you as possible in a situation in your family right now. And if you want to tell us what's going on with your son-in-law, I think we can bring in a lot of prayers and good thoughts.
Yeah, so my second oldest child, my daughter, her husband, well, actually her and her husband and the three children all came down with COVID-19. My daughter works in the medical field, and I think that's where she got it. But she's doing well. I saw her at a distance yesterday. I dropped off some gifts, but she's doing well. The kids are asymptomatic. Her husband took a turn for the worse, and he's in ICU. Not doing so good, but they put him on a BiPAP, and he's kind of leveled off, so he stopped declining. But it's a pretty rough situation for him because he's got pre-existing conditions. So it's a lot of people pulling for him, and I appreciate it. Yeah,
well, everybody in the audience will too. We're all with you, brother.
Thank you.
All right, so let's dive right into our stack of emails. It seems that the more open line shows we have, the more questions it generates. So we're never going to catch up. Ben, can we take the one from Michael from Illinois?
Sure thing. Never say never, Father. Even if it does seem bleak. So Michael from Illinois writes to us regarding the question about awareness of our other existences in the multiverse. Your explanation of a tree with many leaves, I thought, a very good analogy. I also believe that the concept discussed by Aldous Huxley about the brain functioning as somewhat of a reduced valve of sorts might offer an explanation as to why our awareness of these other existences is limited, perhaps only revealing themselves in dreams. One additional question that I have has to do with your ability to experience other existences in very detailed fashion while meditating. I believe that you referred to this as the good place or life. Is there a particular technique or type of meditation that you use to achieve these experiences? As I've practiced a mantra-based meditation technique for several years, most recently transcendental meditation, and have never experienced anything like what you've described at all.
Well, I guess I'll take some of this here in due course. The brain acting as a reducing valve, so to speak. I never thought of that term, but I think it applies. We've often said that experiencing the multiverse or multiverse awareness, as we try to cultivate and as we experience it, is a matter of how much we can take. I think that our species, and remember, the dinosaurs were on Earth for tens of millions of years, really hundreds of millions, in one form or another, and we've only been here for about maybe 2 million. So we are a very young species, and there's every evidence that we may have been messed with by someone or from somewhere or someone at some point. Given the fact that there are 223 genes that shouldn't be in our genome, shouldn't be on the genetic map, so to speak, of human beings if evolution as we understand it is correct. There has not been enough time for us to evolve to where we are. At the same time, we have not evolved to the point where perhaps we could take consciousness of all these lives. As a matter of fact, in our society, when people are aware of different parallel lives, if indeed that's what it is, they're often adjudged to be schizophrenic, and they fill their pockets full of antipsychotic drugs, and off they go. Or in the old days, they were institutionalized because it was assumed there's just one world and one way to experience it, and if you don't do so, you're not normal. So I think that the brain acting as a reducing valve in Michael's terms, Michael's rather good term, is valid. But as far as the kind of meditation, I don't know. All of us are different. In the book Turning Home, I actually give meditation advice, very basic, and people responded who read it saying that it helped them. But I learned meditation myself from or contemplative prayer, to use the correct term, from the Trappist monks at Spencer, Massachusetts, many, many years ago, when I made a retreat there. And I'd read about it, and I had not yet embraced sort of the Eastern tradition with the hesychasm that comes with it. Meditation of that active meditation can be dangerous. You have to be spiritually ready for it. I mean, not that I'm any kind of spiritual person. I am a spiritual person, but not with any great accomplishments. But this is just what happens to me. It doesn't happen often. And it depends where I am. I'll be in a meditative state. And again, I'll have to make an attempt to do this. And I hadn't wanted to write about this because it sounds like I'm doing the medium thing, and that's not what I'm trying to push here. It just sort of happens. I'll be in a meditative state. 9 times out of 10, it'll just be a quiet, refreshing, in the kind of the presence of the divine experience, I don't use mantras, and a mantra is a word that you will repeat in your mind, and it will help get your body in rhythm to be connected with what's around you in a positive way, hopefully. It's ironic that the name Eno is used as a mantra by some cult in California, I was told, because it has so many words in it. One, and Noah, the old spelling of Noah, the guy in the ark, and all this sort of thing. So that's neither here nor there. But I think the entire meditative experience is very personal. But on occasion, when I'm in a different area that is supposed to be where people are bothered by something that seems like a haunting, I will inadvertently get in touch with, or at least encounter or meet an entity, very often. And if it's a parasite, I don't even meditate. I mean, I just, after 50 years of doing this, I like to think that I know what parasites feel like and what their characteristics are, and enough to avoid them, except in a way that could help the people. So I don't meditate in those situations. But very often you'll encounter very unexpected people and beings, many of whom I cannot communicate with, because in my particular situation I communicate verbally, and very often they don't speak English, or they're afraid of me because they perhaps see me through the membrane of the parallel world, if indeed that's what's happening. I believe it is, and the plasma charged membrane, and they'll see me as a ghost. All right. Other times, just as we would see them. Other times they're non-human, very positive, or neutral, or a non-verbal. Just anything and everything is out there, and you have to be very careful. So I don't do anything particular to cultivate that. It's just sometimes it happens. I don't know how else to answer you, Michael, on that. Transcendental meditation, I've never done it. I've heard a lot of good things about it, but there are certain styles of meditation that are better for certain people where they are in their lives at that point, where they are in their spiritual lives. Now, Ben, you've studied this too, and Shane, you'll have some thoughts as well. So, Ben, what say you on this? You studied that subject and approached it maybe from a different point of view than I have.
Yeah, I suppose. Excuse me. I mean, I've had the privilege of being able to take meditation classes at the Providence Zen Center. So that was That was really helpful to kind of get me started
Yeah,
on
we
my
went there together. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, because they offered free meditation classes every Wednesday, and it was like, okay, cool, you can go and learn some Zen meditation, which is more about kind of forgetting the self more than anything else. I believe there's that kind of started me on it, and one of my mentors kind of got me more into the sort of, I guess, for lack of better words, a traveling meditation, which kind of was more, I don't want to say transcendental. It doesn't really have a word. I think that's kind of the downfall of it, was that there's really no way to describe it. I guess the best way to describe it would be so like a form of Kundalini meditation, which, if you don't know what that is, it's essentially like the goal is to quote unquote leave your body, which is not really a thing. This sort of was like, I remember the way that the Zen Buddhists would sit. They had a very specific way they would position themselves, and when I assumed that position with my former mentor, he was like, "Oh no, this is essentially a way for you to, for lack of better words, to like leave yourself and move around." And I was like, "Oh, really? Is that what that's for?" And he was like, "Yeah." And that's kind of, what this does. And so I was like, "Oh, okay." And as time went on, I found that was very draining and not at all helpful. I ended up taking up, or at least attempting to understand the ancient Eastern Christian rite of hesychasm, which essentially just translates to silence, which is it's essentially, you try to achieve silence in your innermost being, because you can sort of understand things better. There are reports from various monks and stuff that they have, visitations and all that, and deal, I guess, with with otherworldly beings, but they warn against it because it could be tricks. And one of my biggest pieces of advice for anybody that's attempting to kind of traverse anywhere is you have to really be careful, because there's this assumption in sort of the spiritualist community that all sort of other beings that you meet are good and benevolent, and that's just not true, right? Not everybody you meet on the street's going to be a nice person. You're going to run into some jerks, and that's just kind of how it is. And it's the same, with the multiverse. You're going to run into people who are jerks, or wish to do harm, or will try to trick you, and that's just kind of how it is. Not to say that there aren't benevolent things out there. There definitely are, but much like life, there is a balance, and you have to just be really careful, and you can't accept things at face value. You have to develop judgment and discernment to understand what sounds beneficial but could be not beneficial. Right? And that's something you have to keep in mind. And, it's not just, I want to learn how to meditate. One of the biggest things that I would suggest is just, work on yourself first, right? You can't run with a broken leg. You gotta, work on yourself and develop something there that's healthy and positive, right?
Okay. Now I want to get Shane in here, but in the meantime, we have a caller. And welcome to Behind the Paranormal. You're on WOON.
Good afternoon, Ben and Paul. Bob here. I have a question for you.
Bob.
How you doing?
Jeffrey, Bob?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
I have a question. First of all, I want to offer my thoughts and prayer for that gentleman's son-in-law, and I'll be saying a prayer for him today. I hope he will have a speedy recovery.
Thank you.
Now, the question I have, as you know, Ben and Paul, my wife passed away 5 years ago. In fact, yesterday would have been our 50th wedding anniversary as she survived. My question is, we would have been married 50 years yesterday. Here's my question. Is it possible for her to communicate to me through numbers? As you know, I'm blind and deaf, so I can't see or hear anything in the house if I'm by myself. Is it possible you can communicate me through numbers?
It's funny you bring that up, Bob, because is it next week or the week after we have Dave Kane on, whose son was the youngest victim in the Station nightclub fire and has communicated according to the family by the means of the number 41 or the number 941. And Dave's writing a new book on this. He wrote one book that our family media company published some years ago, and it's funny. It started to affect me. I mean, it came out to 41. I edited it myself. It came out to 41 chapters, which was totally unintentional. And, I was sort of touched by that myself. So, yeah, there does seem, maybe Ben and Shane have thoughts on this too, but the universe seems to be very much built on numbers. And there seems to be something like behind our lives that's mathematical, and that does seem to help us communicate in whatever form we are with numbers. Can you be more specific? Do you feel comfortable being more specific about what numbers and how?
Sure. First of all, remember the first auction they had? That was a Friday. And the number 5370 came up in the lottery. 53 is the year my wife was born, and 70 was the year we got married. And her birthday constantly comes up with numbers, 953. And sometimes the 14 did it, and it always popped up through lotteries or other things. But when I listen to shows, they got this show comes from 1953, but this show is 914. Those numbers always come up.
Okay.
It's always 914, 53,
a skeptic would say, well, if you're looking for the numbers, they're going to come up. But Shane and Ben, what say you on this?
After you, Shane.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of this happening too, with some people that I've dealt with before, in similar situations. But I mean, for me, it hasn't been strong enough to really say one way or the other. But I know for me, since 9/11, it seems like so many times I look at the clock and it's 9/11. But how many times throughout the day do I look at the clock and I don't remember? It only stands out because of that specific number. So I think a lot of it is if we are looking for it. But I still do think that there might be a little magic to it as well. I think it's probably a little both.
Hey, Ben?
I mean, I wouldn't put it past anyone or anything, right? Math is like this abstract concept that is so far beyond us, and it's really a fascinating concept. And there was an analytical philosopher I used to listen to a podcast he did, and he made a really interesting point, which was, math is mysterious because we can't point to something like a Sesame Street type number in the sky and say that is the number one. And there's nothing like that in the universe that says, okay, this is the number one, or this is the number 1953. It just is kind of this thing that exists, and we understand it and we connect with it. And the way that the human mind makes connections with patterns is just, it's so fascinating, right? We literally built, whole sciences on trying to understand it. Psychology exists to understand why we form these connections. And I think at the end of the day, we ourselves can only derive significance from it. Whether we find it comforting, whether it truly is someone communicating with us. I mean, I wouldn't put it past anything, because there is that sort of universal connection of well, I guess math or numbers, right? What did Christopher Walken say in that movie? I can't remember off the top of my head, where he plays an angel. He's talking to a bunch of kids. He says, "Study your math, kids. It's the key to the universe."
Prophecy.
That's what it was. And
right.
I mean, I don't think he's wrong, right? It's one of those things that's just kind of this universal truth that math kind of is. It's always going to be there, and numbers will always be that sort of mysterious thing that connects us to something we don't understand. And I I wouldn't put it past, your wife, Bob, that it's some sort of communication, I think that's entirely possible.
Yeah, and in our point of view, there is no such thing as death. There are many, many parallel worlds. I mean, if our theories are correct, where she's just fine, and there are many where the laws of physics are such that she can communicate. And then it's not a spiritual thing; it's really quite physical. But so that's our point of view. So, I guess that's probably all we can do for you on that, Bob. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Okay. All right, so now, Shane, we were dealing with a question of meditation here from Michael in Illinois. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the first part of the question with the brain, the reducing valve, all that stuff, you just got to kind of throw it out there. We talked a little bit about it last week, but well, I mean, for one thing, like if we experience it, I'm hearing myself. All right, we're good. If we experience a trauma, our brain shuts off. We can't remember that experience, But also in the case where these strange disappearances, where these people's footprints literally just stop in the middle of the snow or sand, and these people just go missing, and then they end up halfway across or completely across the United States, or even in other countries, and with no recollection of what happened, wearing different clothes, things like that. So there's I don't think there's a difference between those experiences and like the amnesia cases. There's a clear difference. Whereas, because that person didn't just lose their memory, they just disappeared. Like their footprints just stopped. So there's something to all that when, considering the multiverse and portals or whatever we want to call them. And then as far as like since you guys described other forms of meditation, what I do if I'm in a situation, there's sometimes where I won't use those techniques, but then when I feel I need to and I can benefit from doing a type of meditation, what I've always done is if I'm in a location and I need more knowledge, I need more information, I will envision, like I shut everything off, I envision that I grow roots from my body into the ground, and the roots go up into everything around me, all the trees, people, everything. And if I can keep it that way, silence my mind and keep that going, and then envision water running through those roots back up into me, I end up getting a lot of information I wouldn't otherwise had. And actually Bruce Lee used a similar technique in his training, but that's something that I never was taught. It's just something that I've always done, and it works very well when I need to use it.
Okay. That we all used it. I use the white light technique that I learned from, of all people, Ed Warren. And it's one of the few things they taught me that I still use, actually. But in any case, that's for protection as well. But Michael brings up, before we leave the point here, the good world, as we call it, and it's the last chapter of it's actually the epilogue to our 2016 book Ben and I wrote together, Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, and that was a parallel world, I believe, unless I'm totally bonkers here, that we encountered in meditation, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in waking life. And Ben, I know with the dreams, would sometimes share the dream. We'd have similar or the same dreams. Like we'd get up in the morning and I'd start the dream and he'd finish it. That sort of thing. It was really amazing. And one of the things with this good world, as we call it, is that it's not heaven. It's just a place where we seem to be fit in better as a species. I mean, people work. It's not some kind of spiritual paradise, as I said, but it's beautiful. I don't know. I mean, that's possibly touching on parallel worlds, or through meditation and other means as well. So, as a matter of fact, 9 years ago, we were on Coast to Coast AM with it was George Noory, wasn't it, that time, Ben? And
I believe so, yeah.
We debated whether we should go public with this idea, this good world, because people were, we sort of had a reputation for being a feet on the ground. But we decided to go for it, figuring the whole country would be laughing at us. Well, we ended up talking to George about this, and George said, "I've never heard you this far out before." That's a quote. And within the next week, we received over 3,000 emails. 2 of them were derogatory about this idea. Others would say, well, I've been there too, or this particular, they would describe a meeting or a place that we had never said anything about, and I recognized it, at least, and sometimes both of us did. So there was apparently something to that. But on that note, there's a question I really want to get to here because I'm looking forward to it, but we better take our bottom of the hour break. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno and our special guest co-host Shane Sirois for Open Lines today on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. Stick with us, we'll be right back.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to the Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade, the finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Welcome back. It's Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in keeping Woonsocket and the world weird since 2008. So let's get to our question from Peter in Bogota, Colombia. Peter, very faithful listener and very good questioner. So, Ben, if you want to take that first one here. I think a couple of these, his tongue was thrust into his cheek, but go ahead, Ben.
Probably, yes. Okay, yeah, I guess we'll just take them one at a time. So you mentioned Peter writes to us, you mentioned using a joke book to get rid of a parasitic entity in a past case. What inspired you to do that?
Okay, well, it's a very strange story. New Haven, Connecticut, 1979. Unlike Ed Warren, a couple of years before, did not call in the press, and so this case was not well known. By the end of the 70s, I realized that these were parasitical entities, not demons in the classical sense or the theological sense of the term. And I realized that when you have negative energy, negative things going on, people messing around, it rings the dinner bell for these things. And when you bring in positive energy and love and faith and good things, then it cut off the food supply. That was as simple as it seemed to be. So I decided to try this. Now, I would have done this in any garden variety parasite case, but at this point, in this particular case, there were 6 of these things, and they had pretty much run the course of what they were going to do at that period in the attack. Okay, in other words, there was a lot of physical activity going on. There was physical damage to the apartment. There were all sorts of bizarre smells and sounds and this sort of thing. And I just got the feeling they were kind of worn out. I figured maybe the would do them in if we would just try something really positive. Humor can be very, very powerful, unifying force. Everybody loves to laugh. You know, people, they say laughter is the best medicine. Patch Adams and the whole business. It just is one of the most powerful, positive things you can do is laugh together. Not at each other, that's the thing, but something that's really positive. So that's what inspired me to do that.
Okay, shall we move on to the other questions?
Yeah.
What joke?
Well, unless somebody else has some thoughts on that.
I don't. Shane?
Yeah, Shane, you know all about this.
I'll have some thoughts on this entire topic, but we'll let you go through. Since it's kind of directed towards you, and then I can put my 2 cents in.
That's
okay.
Fair. So all right. I guess we'll just hop into them one at a time. What joke book did you use?
You know, no one has ever asked me that before, and I have it right here, the very book that I used, and it's always been in my library. It's published in 1960. That's how old it is. And it's Inside Brother Juniper. Now, I don't know if anybody remembers the Brother Juniper cartoons. They were in some newspapers, but the cartoonist was a priest, Father Justin McCarthy, and maybe it's because I had recently been in the seminary, and the colleague, the former classmate who's now a priest, who called me into this case, had been a classmate of mine in the seminary. These are just little one-liners with, cartoons and this sort of thing.
Could you read us an example?
Yeah, okay. Okay, here's, Brother Juniper is standing, and I apologize for people who are not looking at the video here. If you don't want, he's talking to an old lady. If you don't want to be helped across the street, ma'am, I advise you to start running. All right, and the picture is funny. All right.
It's actually kind of funny.
And then Brother Juniper, he's this little monk, and he's looking at a flower catalog. Funny, you don't look a bit like your pictures, because the flowers are all wilting. It's simple stuff like that, but we just got laughing and going, and it's not making fun of anyone. It's not, sexual or bathroom humor. It's just nice and positive, and it just we had a great time with this little book in 1979, and so that's the book I used. And again, thank you, Peter. Nobody's ever asked me. It's always been in my library, not too far away from the prayer book I used in the Bridgeport case a few years before that.
Coincidence? I think not. So Peter goes on to say, I'll just lump these three in because it's all kind of along the same thing. Did some joke books not work? And how did you know they were having any effect? Were there shrieks of pain?
Well, again, I think his tongue is thrust into his cheek here, but no. Again, it had pretty much carried itself out, but there were the presences were still there. Actually, they all the parasites started to laugh and yuck. No, I'm kidding. They were. All I know is that after we did this, it was peaceful. They were never seen or heard from again. That's all I know, and I attribute it to the positive energy. That's how I know it had some effect. And again, I say this 100 times that I would not recommend this as a normal approach to a parasite case. But in this particular situation, we did use it and it did work. And I didn't go through any. I just grabbed this one on my trip down to the house, and when I got this idea, and we just again, and I stayed in touch with the it was a mother and a daughter, and I stayed in touch with them for months, and everything was fine. So that's about all I can say about that. But it was a dear old little brother Juniper, whom many people may never have heard of.
Mm.
So
shall we keep going?
Yes.
So what?
No, actually, Shane, do you have any thoughts on that? Use of humor, perhaps?
Well, there's two more questions, technically.
Oh, there are more. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there are.
Yes. What was the joke that delivered the coup de grace?
Well, I don't know. We just went through pretty much the book, and I'd read the line and show the picture, and everybody would yuck it up.
And finally, would playing the record, the record album Ernest Borgnine singing The 9 Days of Christmas in true high fidelity have had the same effect?
Well, I have never heard Ernest Borgnine singing that, and I don't think I want to. But I just don't have any answer to that. I mean, you could, I suppose, try anything, but again, it's the introduction of positive energy to cut off the negative energy. So whether Ernest Borgnine could have helped, I know not.
If he made Merlin's Shop of Mystical Wonders, I doubt that he could have.
Well, perhaps. Shane, what do you say?
Yeah, so back when I first started doing this work and, reaching out and helping people, which was a very long time ago, I've always had like a very thirsty mechanical aptitude, so I don't take things at face value. You tell me this is the way something is, I need to understand every single layer and how we got there, how all the working moving parts. So when I approached the work, it was to put down a process to identify trends. And, for instance, why do priests help some people, but a lot of times it doesn't work? Why does it work for a little short period of time and then it comes back worse? Why do other techniques work sometimes and sometimes they don't? So there had been a reason for that. So what are they missing? And they're missing the fact that they're actually not manipulating the true mechanics. So they're fighting the paranormal with the paranormal. So they're, to try to get rid of it when really they're not affecting the true components, what attracted it and what allowed it. So, and then the next step was to look at the type of people that are being affected by these parasites to identify what's common with those people. And what I found was they were all in some kind of vulnerable emotional state of being. So they became targets of these parasites because they need you at a lowered emotional state of being. That's what attracts them to you, connects them to you. And so we need to manipulate that. We need to change that. So like the joke book would help elevate our emotional state of being, bring us into a better place. It breaks the internal dialogue. You start thinking about something else. You're thinking of humor now. You're not thinking of, what's going wrong in your life, because a lot of these people, it all started off with something life altering, something that really affected them emotionally and put them in a lower place. So we need to change the internal dialogue, because it kind of it changes the frequency, it breaks the connection with these entities. And so a lot of times if a priest does go in, or another type of, tactic like that, if it has a positive effect, if that process has a positive effect on the afflicted, and it helps them, if they can sustain that, then the entity goes away and never comes back. But a lot of times, if they have a faith in that process, and it's only momentarily, it'll help for a little while, but they revert. They go back to their old ways of thinking. That lowered emotional state, and the entity comes back, and it usually comes back worse. So the way I get rid of these things is basically educate the person, help them through their issue, help them spiritually, mentally, and then with knowledge to help them stay there, to sustain that, higher emotional state of being, so this entity cannot come back. There was nothing for it, so it won't ever come back. So, that's why, that book, I mean, that's a good way. I would use certain different techniques to get people to change their way of thinking, so I wasn't using those terms. I was just using like mechanics and all this other stuff. I would use other techniques like the book, but other things. But usually, I think the way I've done it, I've got it down so well now. I can help people over the phone, and boom, they never have the problem again. And It's just a matter of how I explain it to them.
Yeah. Well, every case is different. Every victim is different, and that's the thing.
Yep.
We have an email here from Phil in Connecticut, who was one of our show reporters in the infamous Litchfield Triangle, and wanted to kind of get to this. You fellows don't have it, but Ben mentioned his weird car accident where he hit the guardrail and somehow just found himself back on the road unharmed. Both you and Ben something had misgivings about him driving to Massachusetts on that bad weather day. Do you or Ben think he may have slipped into an alternate reality by surviving? And if so, are we all part of that alternate reality in which he thankfully lived, and therefore there's another reality in which he translated? This all makes my head hurt.
I don't think I'm nearly as important as you make me out to be, Phil. I appreciate that, though. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. It's I think we kind of our sort of consciousness. I'm trying to think of how to put this. I think it takes the path of least resistance, and it's not just me. It happens with everyone, right? And all of us all together. It's kind of one of those things where I couldn't tell you. I'm not really sure. I know that something weird happened that day. What had happened, I have no idea. I will clarify. I did not hit the guardrail. The infamous local highway I was talking about. There was a spot which they have since redone at the bottom of a hill where the road didn't pitch. It if you happen to be going fast enough, you could hydroplane very easily. And there's usually at least a handful of deaths every year on that road. And for whatever reason, I remember starting to slip and hydroplane and losing control of my car, and then I blinked and I was back on the road, and nothing changed. It was fine, and don't remember anything else, but I do remember that, and I remember, my car was very unsafe to drive, told me by many mechanics, and I did it anyway because, your first car, in my opinion, should always be terrible, because it teaches you humility. So just wanted to clarify, I didn't hit a guardrail, nothing like that. I just started to hydroplane, and then I blinked, and I was fine. And, it was... But I had this very distinct sensation, like, wow, I think I died, and moved and sort of just shifted and moved, and I think that I'm not entirely sure it put me in a parallel world. I think it just moved me to a world, that kind of progressed and moved forward, and and thus, we translate into a new existence every time, kind of moving in flow with the community. I sound like I'm rambling. I'm having a very hard time putting this together because I haven't really, this is going to sound really weird, but I've never really processed it or really gave it a lot of thought because I didn't think it was practical to give it a ton of thought. I just kind of said, oh, okay, that happened and moved on. And whether it created a parallel timeline or the timeline probably already existed more likely, except it's not a timeline because time doesn't exist. It's I don't want to take the blame for 2020 being so terrible. But at the same time, if that argument were true, then anyone who's ever passed away at any point in time or done anything terrible arguably has the same effect. And maybe they do. Maybe they don't. And I think it's one of those things where, you can think about it all you want and try to draw lines and whatever, but at the end of the day, as a very wise man once told me, is it profitable to do so? And in my opinion, it's not, because I'm here now, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, I think, and we all are, I think, and doing the best we can, and that's all we can really do.
Yeah, well put, Ben. Shane, thoughts?
No, that was pretty. That question was for Ben, but I've had similar things that I just can't explain. Not to that degree, but where with him, he just blinked and he was back on the road. But I've had things where I was in the middle of getting injured really bad, and something happened that kind of saved me that I can't explain. But a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, I think Ben was very astute in saying that in so many words that these things often defy analysis. They're just experiences, and so again, maybe undiscovered science, but I think it's sometimes you just have to savor the experience. And I think it happens all the time. I had kind of one yesterday, almost a Mandela effect sort of thing. And I was there's a meteorology is a hobby of mine. That might surprise some people, but living in New England, maybe not. There's a book that I often will consult, and on the cover is this graphic of just an old weather station with a bunch of stuff hanging on the wall. There was a black illustration with a white snowflake attached to the wall in this picture that I had not been there before. And I think this is a normal condition of the planet and our lives. I mean, we're constantly moving through different parallel worlds. Things are a little different here and there. Or maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know. But, I mean, I swear that wasn't there. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think we have time maybe for one more question, Ben?
We do. And we can either take the one that takes off from this point, which is about the Mandela effect, or we can deal with crisis apparitions. Pick one.
Okay. Well, we haven't talked too much about ghosts, crisis apparitions. Yeah, let's
sure thing. So this is from Brian in Indiana. I would say the town, but I don't think I can pronounce it correctly because I'll probably say it with a French accent.
Portage.
I have Portage. I would have said Portage.
Well, that's because you're so sophisticated.
I'm really not. I don't think I should have passed French. Anyway, I have a question about crisis ghosts or crisis apparitions. I was visited by the ghost of my father, who was tragically killed. He appeared in my apartment about a month after his death. I could see his form clearly, and it was in broad daylight. I would really like to know more about what this meant. This is the only time this has happened, and it only lasted for about 8 to 10 seconds.
Shane, I want to throw that right in your lap.
Yeah, well, I'll refer to the apple orchard case, where this gentleman in Connecticut worked. He was a young man, and the family kind of took him under their wing, and he came from a troubled home or whatever, and he felt like he had purpose there, and anyways, he got into some trouble and he committed suicide. And shortly after that, people that come in to pick apples, they'd hear this voice screaming at him, "Get out of here, leave!" And then other people would hear voices talking to him in the store and everything. And I think Paul and I both agree that it's not him; it's a parasite that is capitalizing on this tragic event. And he may have already had that parasite attached to him prior to him committing suicide. It could have been already connected to him, and then him committing suicide on the property. Everyone assumed that this voice that they're hearing now is him, which really is usually a parasitic entity capitalizing and feeding off of that tragic event, and like I said, could have been attached to him to begin with. And I see this a lot with people, that tragic events where people are killed, and it affects people emotionally. They'll see those people there, but then it changes once they start talking to it. Dad, Uncle Joe. And next thing you know, it's not Dad or Uncle Joe anymore. It's something very, very nasty. And I will say, I have had interaction with something that was what it appeared to be, the person that it appeared to be, where I was given information by this person. That's happened before. Then it wasn't a parasite. But most of these cases that we deal with, described like you're describing it, it's usually not that person. It's usually a parasite.
Yeah, I remember that farm case. All three of us were involved in that. But to get back to Brian's question here, in another point of view, perhaps, yeah, I mean, the crisis apparition is a well-known phenomenon, and usually it's someone is in dire straits, somewhere else, far away maybe, and you see them at the moment when they're having their accident or whatever has happened. We had the case in Shannon. I don't know if you ever got involved in this case, but this is in 1998, and Ben ended up involved in it when he got old enough in Burrillville, Rhode Island, right in our listening area. And there was a woman who had been a parasite victim, but had a lot of terrible events during her life. She had found the body of a friend who had died, that sort of thing. And she had a crisis apparition, or just an apparition of her grandmother, who appeared and just said she wanted the girl to know that she was okay. She translated, I guess, a couple of months before this. And the girl was afraid. This is the first time I've ever heard this. She said, "I don't want any more ghosts." And it was, just her grandmother, assuring her, at least that's what it appeared to be. I mean, I didn't see it myself. So I think that you have to be very, as Shane says, very discerning to see what this is. But I've had people swear to me it was not a parasite. I know that I knew this person. I love this person. This is who it was. And that's explained very easily by our multiverse ideas, if those are correct ideas, that there are many, many worlds in which your loved one, or whoever it may have been, is still going on in a parallel life and never translated, never died. And these worlds can intersect in a number of places and wash over one another. Hence maybe the Mandela effect that we see sometimes, where things are just a little bit different in that part of the world family. We have a number of, at least the way we put it, a number of worlds we are traversing, and they're all parallel but very close in their physical laws and in their makeup and in their residence, as opposed to some world that's totally alien that might be farther away and harder to access, so to speak. So I think it's very possible that this was a legitimate experience. If you feel that it was, and you do not feel any trepidation about it, you do not feel uncomfortable with it, then I would say probably was. And it hasn't happened again, so it's probably just... I would ask, though, did the person in the apparition seem aware of you or not? Very often you'll have a parallel world intersect point where you can see them, but they can't see you, or hear you, or whatever. So
Can I clarify?
yeah.
Yeah, I just want to clarify my point too. So yeah, I mean, I do believe that people see loved ones after they've passed, but what I meant to really, I guess I wasn't clear in the way I described it, but what happens is people kind of get obsessed with the idea and they start talking to it all the time to that loved one. Yeah. And that draws in a parasite. So be comforted by the experience, but take it as it comes. Don't obsess about it, because that kind of gets you in trouble.
Yeah, Ben.
I think it's interesting that this was the one and only time that the apparition actually happened, and that kind of leads me to believe, okay, it's not a parasite, because unless it evolved into something else that we just don't know about, I think there's not enough pieces of the puzzle to kind of put together a definitive explanation. But I do think it's interesting that it's only been one time, and it wasn't immediately after, so you can't, say anything about it like, oh, well, maybe it's just kind of like a trauma thing, or maybe it is. I don't know. I think it might just be, seeing your father in a parallel world, just kind of still kicking, doing his thing, walking around. Unless there's other stuff going on in, your china being thrown around your apartment or something like that. I would say, just take the experience for what it is, right? You saw maybe into a parallel world, and you just kind of go from there. Because I think everything else that could be said about it, you guys already said.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, I think that's about all we have time for. I will put the picture of this, for those who are not watching the video, I'll put the picture of this book, the Little Brother Juniper book, on a talking points page for this show within the next few hours, so that you can at least get a kick out of looking at it. Again, it's an old book, 1960. So let's take away our announcements, Ben.
Sure thing. So with dimming prospects because of COVID, we plan to speak at the New England Parafest on April 10th and 11th in 2021 in Kittery, Maine, and hope to do a live show, or live broadcast, I should say, of this show with the panel of speakers on Sunday the 11th. More information will be forthcoming.
And all three of us are working on a book with our good friend Alexander Petikoff that will be out later next year. Behind the Paranormal 3, Uneasy Skies, based on our own UFO experiences and those of our show guests over the years.
You can check out our current books along with those of our other co-hosts at the show website, behindtheparanormal.com, where you can also find out more about the show, our many cases over the years, our public appearances, and how to book us, along with some of our 900-plus free recorded shows from our 12-plus years on the air, including our 4.5-year run on CBS Radio, along with special shows and podcasts.
We're slowly reloading recorded shows into the archives at BehindTheParanormal.com after a series of technical issues suddenly appeared to have been straightened out after 2.5 years. Past shows back to late 2009 are available already on major podcast platforms and apps, including YouTube, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, the Paranormal Radio app, and TalkStream Live, and more. Soon we plan to have all the shows back to 2008 uploaded to these apps and to our website, and they're all free, so have at it. There are links to several charities we've adopted on the show, including USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, Youth Mentoring Connection in Los Angeles, Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and the Sisterhood of Ground Zero, along with the Milk Fund here in northern Rhode Island. Shane, what's cooking with you?
Well, not much. I get that same Pair Fest there in April, speaking with you guys, and also I'll be having that Rumble.com channel coming up soon. It's going to be a whole new podcast. I'll even be doing live stuff. And then also I just want to reiterate any positive thoughts from my daughter's husband, who I forgot to mention. His name is Andrew Greiner. Would be much appreciated.
Absolutely. What's next week, Ben?
So next week we have Explaining UFOs to Children with Philip Mantle. UFOs and all sorts of subjects that have even been in the mainstream news, and we can't forget the phenomena can scare children. So we'll be talking about how to explain extraterrestrials to your youngins.
Yeah, and also if they think they're being abducted, that's even scarier. So we'll talk about that. So we'll leave you today with a quote from Person or Persons Unknown. Your best teacher is your last mistake. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno.
And I'm Shane Sirois. Thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.